Hey everyone, how you doing? Today we're going to do a video. It's a little bit different from some of the other ones I've done. We're going to talk to Lenz Weber, one of the developers on the Redux core team. And why is that important? Because I wanted to learn TypeScript. Now this video is from back in October, but it's still extremely relevant. I think the only reason I'm saying it's from October is so you understand I've come a long way since this video. The content in it actually taught me a lot about TypeScript. And I even rewatched it and learned a few things that I had forgotten. I think it's really good for you, even if you know TypeScript, but especially if you're a beginner. This is going to teach you everything you need to know to feel like a pro, or at least feel like you know a little bit more about what's going on. Because what we're going to do today is look at my form library, OneForm, and we're going to look at what it is to convert this library to TypeScript. I've already converted a lot of it, but now I'm checking with a professional who knows TypeScript, and he's going to tell me everything I've done wrong.
Hi, my name is Lenz Weber-Tronic. I work as a developer on the Redux team. I'm a maintainer of Redux Toolkit, and I also work as a senior full stack developer. So I'm pretty much touching everything, and I'm working a lot with a TypeScript. So that's why Kevin has brought me over here today. I've been following his journey, learning TypeScript myself a little bit on Twitter and giving tips here and there. And apparently I was useful enough that he wanted me on here.
Yeah, I should also add that you're one of the people who helped teach me TypeScript. The biggest thing I learned from you was type inference and how you can reduce the number of types that you have to put in TypeScript and have it infer what it needs to infer. And the best tool I found to identify that is VS Code. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the best tool. That's just the best one in my JavaScript sphere that helps me accomplish my task.
Yeah, definitely. My point is always that good TypeScript should look like no TypeScript. So you as a user and consumer of a library should not be writing a lot of TypeScript code or declarations or anything, except in the few points where it's really necessary, like typing a function argument. But you should never assign a type to a variable where you assign the return type from a function from a library or something. That should be the job of that library. So in the end, if you have libraries that have good types, you almost don't write any TypeScript there. You get all the benefits like good IDE integration and everything like that. And yeah, VS Code is a good choice for that because it integrates directly with the TypeScript language server. Other tools can do that too, and they do it, but VS Code is the natural choice because it's like the same manufacturer than TypeScript. Actually, when you mention it, we can check out one thing I'm pretty sure you haven't seen before, and that's an extension for VS Code. If you're up for experiments,
yeah, let's try something.
Then search for 2/.
2/?
Yeah, it's from Orta.
Oh,
Orta
that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing you showed me. Oh, I didn't know I could use this. Okay.
You can do those 2/ queries in your editor in VS Code. So you don't even have to hover if you're working on something, but you just go to any variable where you might be interested in what the type of that variable is. And now you do the roof thingy and then a question mark, or the other way around. I'm never really sure. Yeah. And now you can edit somewhere completely else. You don't have to have your mouse cursor here, and it will always show you the updated type of that variable there.
I see. So if I put this in, this is like a good way to share code with people, because then it shows it in the comments here. This works in the TypeScript playground as well?
Yeah, that's where I picked it up. Orta is not a member of the TypeScript team anymore, but he spent a lot of time working on the documentation of TypeScript and also on the TS Playground. And he wrote 2/, which is like, this is one little part of 2/. 2/ allows you to embed code in your documentation that is statically compiled to be fully typed. So the user doesn't have to boot TypeScript when you open the docs, but they can hover everything and they will get the full types of everything and stuff like that. So it's a really cool type of software. And you can even use it for like testing types and stuff like that. But for just working in the editor, I find this little thing to be so useful, especially when you have like 5 different variables, all essentially want to hover at the same time and you only have one mouse cursor.
Yeah, what's an example of that? So if I have these two, right, and I just want to figure out what they are, I just put this in real quick and then I can see what they're referencing.
And now you would write code at a different point in your application, like in your write window. And if it kind of impacts the one on the left, it would automatically instantly change. You see what types you're getting in the end. And of course, as a library author, where you kind of want to see what comes out of using a library in the end while you're editing the library, that's incredibly useful.
Yeah, let me try that here. So I've got this one. So if this one's called subscriber, right? So you're saying I can edit this type now, and let's say add another declaration that it could be like a string or something, Well, actually, it's not going to show anything because this is taking a generic. But if I add another generic maybe here?
I think it would be more interesting to work on a return value of something than an input argument here.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's see, a function that returns. Well,
I'm not sure how your library works.
Yeah. This is like the very back end of it. Let's see, I got a return value. There it is. There's a return value. So you're saying something like this?
Yeah, my thought would be more like if you use this method, like if you have a code where you use callback method or something.
So let me see if I remember.
You assign the result of calling use callback somewhere in a test, for example. Then you put that again next to it, and then you change your function itself, and you see how the return type changes and stuff like that.
Yeah, let me see if I have tests for this one. Yeah, I do have tests for it. Great. And so this one's called what? Get observable. So I look for get observable. I don't have that one in there for some reason. Great test coverage. Good first impression. Here's a published one. Okay, published.
Honestly, you have tests.
So what really matters is where this is located, right?
Yeah, where that is pointing. In case you might want to assign it to a variable, maybe. Or that's interesting because now you kind of get the inference shown here. But still, it's something you will figure out at some point where it's useful, and probably when we go through it now, it will also become more apparent. I think we don't need to play around with this too long.
Okay. Actually, I think the types are in here. If I look at this, and we can go over this. So here's the function, and then it has this as an observable identifier, and this is a value, but this one is part of the generic. It's not inferring as a string, but it sees that there's a generic there, and it's inferring the generic as a string, because I'm not doing this. I'm not putting string here. So if I put something like this, it should give me a type error. I don't even know what's going on here. This type takes a generic, but this function is not of this type. It's of this type with a...
Essentially, you get the type from using value here, and that's what gives it to you, or essentially from the function that calls it.
So something good to know is it's been over a month since I looked at this code, since I stopped. Yeah. And that's actually a good thing, because one of the things I want to teach is the documentation of TypeScript and how it can show you as a developer the intent of the developer who put it together. Although the other side effect is I might have not done a good job, and then it's not going to show it very well. But it's also a learning opportunity. So this is my first time converting something to TypeScript. Everything else I've done has been from scratch. And so I'll start with kind of the basics of how this library works. So it's a form library, and if we look at the stories for it, that's like the best way. You'll get an overview of exactly how it works. This one form component is actually two things. It's one form provider, which yes is exported now as a separate component. And then it's also a form component that's also now exported, which this is just an HTML form. There's some reason behind making it like this. We can find out real quick why I did that, because I don't remember. It's been so long. And it looks like I've converted this one as well for some reason. There must have been some weird type inference. Yeah, with the translating the props and stuff. Okay, so there's some reason I've done it. I built in form submission into the form. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Yeah. Then over here, now you can put whatever you want inside of here. So pretend these are both there because they're inside of this one form component. And then that taking whatever args are being passed at this point, the only args are just an onChange and onSubmit that we're passing into it. And then the field component wraps an input. And the onChange and value are passed in from the field using cloning. And then this field value hooks into the context, looks up this name in this like a store behind the scenes. It could be like a Redux store or something like that, but I just did it with React context in this particular framework. And this input has a name as well, and that name is actually being looked at by the field. Now, I later found out that the names are optional on inputs. You can add the name on the field instead of the input if you want, but that doesn't exist yet. So right now, the field is looking at the input, it's grabbing this name value, it's creating a storage container with an observable, and that's all this stuff here. And then there are listeners for those observables, and this field value will update the value when the observable is changed for the input. And the reason that's happening is because there's an onChange and value prop being passed in from the field. So hopefully that makes sense. That was complicated, but behind the scenes, this and this are being passed in from field. That's what's really important here. And then field is also looking at this name prop to figure out what state segment it's putting its information into. And then these state segments could be of any value. It doesn't have to be a string. It happens to be a string in this case, but it doesn't have to be a string, which is why I have to pass a generic full levels deep. Actually, I should say from the field component into the use field hook, into the use field data hook, into other hooks all the way down the chain, because all of these contexts have to be aware of whatever type of value that you're using for that particular one. For instance, checkboxes, the value is true or false. So now you got a Boolean. Okay, so you got string and Boolean, and then you could also, for instance, pass an object in there or an array or something for some reason because you have a special kind of data set that you want to put in there. and you don't want it to just be a string. And so there are different reasons you may or may not want to do that. I want to infer what people want to use. I don't want to determine what people want to use ahead of time and say, okay, you're only restricted to these, even though the library technically allows for more. And the only value you can't use is undefined, because as far as I know, this is not 100%, but when I was going through the code and typing everything, undefined triggers it to become like kill the observable. That says, hey, we're done. There's no value in here. Null is fine, but undefined kills it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you also have the problem with general inputs that are of the value undefined, that a React will go from a controlled component to an uncontrolled component.
Yes, yes.
And if that happens, you get a warning on the console, which is a very valid warning, because you usually don't want to do that. So if you do it in a library, your consumers will be like, well, why is everything yellow here?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So if it gets set to undefined, I think it kills the observable. There's somewhere that I'm looking for an object, and if the value, like set value or something happens, I don't know if it's in here or somewhere, but if a set value happens with undefined, yeah, it would kill it because it's not a valid value for typical forms. All right, well, we can look at that later, but I know there's some way to set a value. And when you set that value, it does it. But we can start like from the beginning. We could either look from the top level, but the problem is not all of it's done. So there's only some of these done. Or we could look more specifically into the observable itself, how that's built, and then how I kind of build on that. Because that's where the type initiation happens. This very first function, create observable, once you get here, that's where the data is all stored. And then every other hook in one form that's managing state, errors, visitation, which is like if you've touched the field or not, or any other thing. Those things are all coming from this create observable function. This is the observable. This is like the very base here is create observable. The code used to start here, and now it starts way at the top. One other thing I've changed as I've done this is there are no more default exports in the TypeScript files.
Yeah. I think that's generally a good thing, because default exports are so confusing to people. I mean, of course, it's just your own code and nobody else is going to see that part, but I've seen people really struggle with the concept.
Yeah, I mean, I like the default exports because I always made the name the same. I never changed it. But the reason I got rid of it, even though it was super convenient, is because when you're using TypeScript, it's better to not use it. Since when you're importing, you're usually importing multiple types as well. And so it just becomes more readable. You're already making it an object. You're already going to import types. So it makes sense just to do it all in one go. And so everything has changed to this. I noticed this at work when I was doing it. And then I was like, that's a good pattern. Corey House also recommended this, export only. But he was working in TypeScript and I was not. And so it didn't make sense to me. He put all these reasons. I was like, you're not selling me on it. I don't get it. Like, I'm not going to name them differently. It's a default export. I'm just going to name it the same as the file. And that's it, right? But now that I'm doing TypeScript, it's better to not do it with the default export.
But for me, honestly, the main argument is usually I don't just have one export. And the other thing is, if you rename the file, then go you manually through everything and rename it on the import, or is it going to explode, or what's going to happen? And when you just rename a function in a file, then actually your IDE will help you and correct those imports everywhere and all the stuff.
Let's try that.
It's just more convenient that way.
It didn't change anything. It didn't say anything.
No, you have to use Control R or F2 or something. There's
this one here? Yeah.
No, not that one. What do I press usually?
F2 does this one.
Yeah, exactly. And now you just change it?
Well, I'm a little afraid to do it because of how many files are going to get changed.
You have Git or?
Yeah, but I see what you're saying. So you hit F2 and then you can change it here and it changes it everywhere.
Yeah. Or you just press Shift Enter.
So just call it C observable and then Shift Enter. Oh, wow. And it tells me everywhere that gets modified. Oh my gosh. Okay, so obviously I don't know how to use VS Code either. I just know how to get by. I don't consider myself knowledgeable in VS Code anymore.
Yeah, you think you changed over from Sublime?
Yeah, Sublime Text. Yeah, I'd been using it for so many years. I don't know if you can tell. So this is it's broken in this view for some reason. I think my plugin's messed up. It broke suddenly because this field is supposed to be a green color. Something's wrong there. But if you look at the colors here, this will always be this color. When you start seeing patterns like this, you start seeing the colors are exactly the same. It makes sense. And then the function names will always be this color. So I know it's the publish function if it's that purple color. I know it's the value if it's this color. And so I added that plugin to be able to do that. I can see that this value is the same as this value because they're always that color. Yeah, so that's the difference there. All right, man. So everything I'm learning right now has nothing to do with this code.
Well, on the same hand, it has everything to do with it because all of that plays into it.
Yeah, it does. That's a very good point. So I have this create observable function, and this basically creates your observable. Now, there's an interesting thing I did did at the bottom here. So the return value, I had to create a variable here because what I tried to do at first was just to return like that. But then when I'm importing it knows the types of these, but it doesn't know the object that you're getting. It doesn't know what the return value is, that it's an observable with the subscriber value. Like there's no way to find that. So you just got these random functions here. And then I had to define the types on the functions, but I wanted to infer the types on the functions. So to infer the types on the functions, if I did this, any function here that, I don't know, something with how it got the types and everything, it was like able to reference that. I don't remember exactly what's going on. This literally only exists for unit tests, this one here.
In this case, of course, if you just return it, it will not magically pick up, oh yeah, I have a type that matches this shape or something, and then assign that. You have to be explicit, either by declaring that variable and returning that variable, or by putting it in as a return type. And if you really want a specific type to be here, you probably had to do that. Or if you would be using TypeScript 4.9, but I'm not sure if there's even a beta out yet, you could do something like certifies this type as this type, and then you can like safely cast without accidentally losing type safety on the return. But none of these is particularly nice. There is one way you could get around that by creating an identity function, essentially. So you would just really write a function identity and give it a generic. You would pass the top thing into the function and the bottom. So it would essentially like do a cast with a valid check, and then you could get around it.
Yeah, it might be less readable though than this. But you're saying some function that basically typecast or something like that, and what it would do would take two arguments.
Actually, just one argument and one generic argument. The generic would be on the right hand here.
Right in front of there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you give it an argument of type T.
We'll just call it arg of type T. And then you're basically...
You just return arg. You don't need to do anything else.
And then it infers that, yeah, because you don't need to do this because it already knows. It's literally right here.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if I did this and then I returned it here as typecast, I mean, we can try it real quick.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I have to pass that in as a generic on right here. And then I pass this, and then this one gets passed in here. I'll reformat it. Okay, so something like this, you're saying.
Yeah.
This shouldn't even work because typecast is defined at the bottom.
Oh, that's fine.
I don't know why it's working. No, because it shouldn't hoist it. Oh, because the function's called after it's defined.
Yeah, the function is called later.
Okay, well, I don't like that I did it this way, but I did it only because we're at the bottom of the file, just to make it easier. So let's see the typecast. So that tells us that the return value is observable subscriber value, which is what I had here. And then I can put it in the return here. I don't have to create a separate return value variable. And then when I look at it here, I mean, I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore, so I can't tell you. I think I know what it was. So this thing here, I wanted it to be of observable value. That's what I wanted it. I didn't want to have to define every object property separately. So in here, it's a record of the identifier plus this. And because I wanted to associate it, it has to be this object thing here. I had to export this object as a specific type. Otherwise, like you were saying, it couldn't cast it. It wouldn't know that the properties in this object are the exact same as this type. That's why I did it that way. Okay, so then this works because it's not erroring. This is of type observable value. And here I'm assigning it to whatever this is, and it's working fine. Let's say we remove the typecast. It should error. I'm not sure.
It wouldn't error.
It wouldn't error?
Because TypeScript is duck type, so it just like it holds the puzzle piece up, and if the puzzle piece fits into the hole, then it's correct. Even if there are additional values, you still match the known values. But if one is missing, then you get the error. But now you get the error on the left side on usage, essentially. And if you have the pattern that we just had with the typecast...
You're saying it's here, it's now complaining that, I'm missing the thing. So I didn't need to export it as that type, or it's just useful to have that because it tells you when you call this function, it's exporting that type rather than a bunch of object collection.
Well, depends a little bit on what you exactly want to be specific. And in this case, you kind of want to be specific and you kind of want to say it's exactly this.
Yeah, I want to show one other thing here because we were talking about this in my tweets, that if you export it as this type, that also doesn't work because it doesn't care what's in here now. You're literally saying the type is this regardless of what's on this side. And that you lose your type safety as soon as you put this as here.
Yeah, that's a type assertion, and that type assertion always means I know better than the compiler. And the compiler will, in that moment, trust you and only warn you if it's completely, really, really, really wrong.
What happens if I move subscribe now and we look at the left side? Yeah, see, now it doesn't care. See, now it doesn't error because we told it was this type, even though it's missing properties. But now it's not going to work properly. It's going to work like it's JavaScript.
And do it to the typecast now, like you had before. I think it should be in your undo buffer still. Yeah, and if you now remove one of the properties on the right, the warning on the right side.
That's even better. That's better than what I had before. So when I did it before, well, actually, before I had the return value. Hang on, let me try it. Before it would have done it too. So even with the typecast function, it does it. Let me copy this, and we'll go even further back in time. Okay, so this is what I had, and this is what we changed it to. And this is not going to be called, so it shouldn't matter. So here, if I remove subscribe, the error is on the return value.
Yeah.
Because it's saying my return value type doesn't match this. But if I use typecast, so if I comment all this out that I had here, and we use this typecast function, now when I remove subscribe, it's going to error in the object itself, not somewhere else that I can't see. It's going to error right in the objects telling me that... We'll talk about how to parse these. That's one thing I want to review. I'm going to go near the bottom here so I can see what the actual error is. Subscribe is declared here. It's kind of confusing. It's wanting me to put a subscribe
directly
in
above that is interesting because it here says, if you go a little bit up where this sentence starts, it will, property subscribe is missing in this type, but present in the other type. And because those types in between are so long, it's practically unreadable. I never actually tried that extension that Matt is building right now.
What's it called?
Probably explain TypeScript or something.
Maybe 2 words. I'm not seeing it. Yeah, I wanted to install that extension. I didn't know it was ready. I thought it was just he was experimenting.
Let's see. A TypeScript error translator, probably.
I don't like to have very many plugins in here, but this guy, yeah, Matt, he works on XState, the viewer for XState's state thing, right? That's his...
No, that's not what he's doing at the moment. He's at Vercel, and he's doing DevRel for Turbo Repo 3 days a week, I think. And 2 days a week, he's working on his TypeScript course. And he just 2 days ago or so put out the first chapters for free, and the feedback was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I haven't looked at it because I have chaos going on right now, but that should be super interesting and big recommendation for everyone.
Oh, I didn't know he put this together. Yeah, I know he was doing the TypeScript course. It says at the bottom here, Pocock? I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. Developer advocate at Stately and member of XState core team. I teach TypeScript, XState, and React on my Twitter and at conferences. One of you guys is retweeting him for me. And I get all his tweets about all this TypeScript stuff.
Yeah, but by now he's at Vercel. He changed like 4 months ago.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So maybe your cache is a little bit out of date there or something.
Yeah, I'll look at Twitter here, and it says speaker teacher in DevRel at Turbo Repo and at Vercel. Okay, building total TypeScript. Cool. So this is his error thing. I installed it. So now I should be able to see the error nicer.
I'm not sure if we have to press a key or something.
Yeah, let me look at the plugin. Maybe there's a setting or something. I'm interrupting you because this video was recorded in October, so everything's a little bit different now. The plugin we're talking about is actually called Total TypeScript. This is what it looks like now, and it is the same functionality, but it even has some extra pieces to it which help teach you TypeScript as you see stuff in the code. So if you see something you've never seen before, you get a blue underline, you can hover over it, it'll teach you about what that blue underline means. That was not available at the time of recording, but it is available now in Total TypeScript, which is, if you had the old plugin, it will convert you automatically to the new one, so you don't have to worry about anything. Everything else we said in the video is still relevant. Okay, back to the video. Show full translation of the error. I don't know what that means. Yes.
There's a TLDR and a full translation.
Yeah, the TLDR is checked, so I want that one. I don't know what I'm looking for. So I zoom in here. It's got to recolor everything. It's not working. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Yeah, give it time to paint.
Yeah. And then
TypeScript takes even longer.
Oh, there it is. Translation.
Yeah, that's the translation.
Okay, it's like in the middle of this. So there's like a huge bit of muck
it's
there.
Probably below it or something.
And then right here.
Yeah, and then there's a link for see full translation.
Yeah. Oh, do I want to open it in tserrortranslator.virtual? Okay.
Well, let's see.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the crazy error that we were getting before, and then it translates it now saying subscribe is missing in type. That's the one we were seeing before, but the translation says you haven't passed all the required properties. See, this is way easier. Now this is understandable. So this is a type that requires some values. It looks like I'm missing one, and it's saying, still a little confusing, but these are the values I have, and it's saying is missing the subscribe property. So this is my object here, and it's saying it's missing the subscribe property. That's a better translation from what we just saw.
And you even get the explanation further down. So you get like, I'm looking at this object and I have that other object, and then it translates every sub arrow that you get to.
Oh, all the other ones. I see. I was expecting this, but you passed this. This is kind of, you had to infer it on this one.
And I think that's something really important because many people can't read error messages. This is obviously a confusing one, but people stop even before that because at some point maybe error messages didn't make sense, and after that they never really started reading them or something. And going at it and just saying, okay, I'll translate this for you and I'll give you something maybe a little bit more understandable to read, get many people back to that point of actually reading them, and that would help a lot of people, I feel.
I think so too. I think that's a big deal. So now I want to import this, and this is another cool feature of TypeScript. If you go to this quick fix, it shows it right there, and it'll import it for me. Now, sometimes it imports in the right spot, sometimes it doesn't. I also like to format these like this just so they're consistent. And also, it put double quotes, and my project has single quotes. I'm not going to change it this late in the game. It's just too much to change it, so I just leave it. Now I can use this typecast function, and it provides better type feedback than I had previously, except there's one other thing I would normally change is I would put the prints here because of the way I format it. So now we have a typecast function. We send it the generic, and then we pass it the thing that we're returning. And now I don't have to have the extra return value. I can just use this function. It's more functional to me. I like this approach. It should be more clear. And also the errors are more clear because they happen in the right spot. They happen where I would expect to see the error, not in the variable declaration saying it's not matching the type that you defined as the type. I know it should be this type, and therefore it's not. So
I mean, you would pretty much get the same experience if you would just put it at the top of the function as a return value. Then it will also arrow exactly down here. Then the question is really how much you want to tell, how direct you want to be with that declaration. Do I want it to be inferred and not really care? And the point, if you infer it, which would be you don't do even the typecast, then you get the error on usage. And oftentimes in end user code, that's totally fine. In other cases, you might want the error on return and not later when you use it. So it's always that question, where do I want the error? Where do I want to get warned? Where do I want my clear boundaries of a function? There's a lot of very personal preference in there, I feel.
Interesting. Yeah, so there's even more stuff to keep track of. Okay.
It's just really make up the style of TypeScript that fits you most. And nobody can really tell you. You have those 3-4 options for everything, and then you figure out how for you the code is the least cluttered. And we look at this now. Of course, it's indented one more level, and you could get that indentation away by saying, no, I put it in as a return type at the top, and I also have my function signature a little bit clearer.
Oh, you're saying I can make this as the return type?
Yeah.
How do I do that? So I don't need the typecast function, you're saying. I would just return this, and I can...
If you just put it on the function return type in the top.
You're saying this is the return type?
No, before the fat arrow. Fat arrow is line 65 or so, yeah. And
it would have to be here. I already got something. Oh, that's the generic coming in. You're saying...
That's generic. The return type goes here.
Right here? The colon?
And then the colon and then this.
Now, the question is it going to get access to subscriber value? It looks like it would, yeah.
Now you could skip it at the bottom. That works too.
Let me see. If I remove this, it works. Okay. So I don't even need that typecast.
Yeah.
Why haven't I done this the whole time? Like, why? I just didn't know you could do it this way? Or is there some trick that I'm missing?
I think you took me too literally when I said use inference all the time. There might be points in time where you want to be specific and explicit. So inference is a powerful tool, but it's not always something you need.
So I don't need the typecast.
Deleting the typecast file again.
Yeah, I don't need it anymore. We'll see. If I need it, it's in my recycle bin. So I got it. Okay, hang on. We're not done yet. Okay, I'm going finding my function. There's so many extra things in this file than there used to be. This used to be the top of the file, and look how many lines. We're at 54 already by the time we get there. I know my lines are more than most people, but we're much further down in the file than I would normally expect to be.
Oh, you wouldn't want to open Redux Toolkit. It's like 20% JavaScript code.
Oh my god. Right, if this is an object, I can't do this anymore because it would expect there to be an object here. Yeah, and then I would have to return value. So let's look at a function that takes an object for values. This one of these has got to take an object. This does not take an object. Oh, it does right here. Here's the object. No, this is the return value. This is a weird formatting because it has the thing here. This doesn't take any values. What if this took an object? So initial value was part of an object state. If I do it like this now, it's not going to work because it's going to assume...
No, it's totally going to work.
Oh, because I can do the type of the object here before the parenthesis, and then this is all outside of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
You got some nesting wrong here right now, but the gist of it would be that.
Okay, so I can still do whatever. I don't know why I didn't do this the whole time. I'm actually really upset with myself that this whole time I'm trying to work around this problem. You know how long I must have spent on this just to figure out how to get it with the return value and stuff? I must have spent at least a couple hours trying to figure that out. One fix that was huge.
That's completely normal and understandable when you learn something new. There's too much information. There's too much new concept at once. It's fine. Everybody, when they pick up something new, is standing in front of it like, what am I going to do with this mountain of information? And it always takes a few months or even years until everything sinks in and you're fluent in every part. That's learning.
Yeah, but this is so much. Here's something else. Let's talk about a different pattern I have. So here's a subscriber, right? We talked about I didn't want function overloads. So I said a subscriber could be this or this. And so this has a value here with a value of type. So it could take a value and not return anything, or take no value and again, not return anything. And I have to do this because I can't make this optional, right? Or if I made the value optional, then I don't need the second one.
If you made it optional, you wouldn't need the second one, I feel.
Let's find out. So how is this used? So subscriber is used on, it is a subscriber here that's stored on there. And somebody passes a value to it when they call the subscribe function. It's right here. Yeah, here's the subscriber. So they call subscribe, which is going to happen like way deeper. I think it's one of these files where they use it. No, it's not these. It's one of the subhooks. Each one has its own field value. Let's do that one. That's a TS file. It's great. That's what we want. Here's where I subscribe to field value. This is eventually coming. It is this function. It's just named differently by the time it gets in here. And then we can tell that by looking here. Yeah, it's a subscriber with either a value type or undefined. Okay, so the identifier is the field name, and then the subscriber is set local value. So this function here has the option of not taking a parameter. And you're saying that if I change this here so that I don't have that, and I basically remove this, and so it's just taking a function that takes a value and then this is optional, then I won't error. But this one's not erroring because this function does take it. I have to wrap it or something. Let me see if I can make it. I'm not going to put the question mark yet. I want it to complain.
You're not going to get it to complain. I mean, on the right, if you remove the question mark, it will complain, yeah.
There's no question mark.
Wait. If you would give it a different argument, it would complain. But it's totally valid to put in a function that doesn't take an argument, call it with an argument, because that would not really be an error if you look at it that way.
Typically, I would get a TypeScript error when that happens, but let's put a string in here and see if it errors.
Yeah,
okay.
Of course that errors.
So that errors because string is not assignable to value type or subscriber. And this is subscriber, yeah. But so I guess value type could be undefined. Like, what does it think value type is what I want to know.
The point is, you're giving in a function here, and that function has to be called with an argument of something. But realistically, if you look at it, if you call this function with any argument, it will still work, because it just doesn't use those arguments.
I want to know what value type is defined as here, because if I define value type as, let's say, it's a string, that's not where I do it here, no?
No, it would be on subscribe to field value, probably.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it would be. Oh, hang on. I confused myself. This is where you're saying I should put it.
Yeah. Okay, that doesn't even take an argument. Then I don't know where it would come from.
I don't know where this is coming, because this might be coming from somewhere else. It says value type or undefined. Here it does not have or undefined. Here it says it's only value type. So this must be somewhere else that it's modifying this to add the undefined.
Yeah, probably. But
I might have already adjusted it. There might be another place where I actually get the subscriber, and then this doesn't work right because of that. I might have changed this code at some point. This subscriber is from create-observable. Create-observable goes into this use-observable state, and it might be here where we're actually seeing that. We're looking for subscribe to value here, and here the subscriber has to, I'm confused. I don't even want to.
I think you're going to look for create observable. So go to your create observable function on the right.
Oh, it works. I can just tell you right now, it's working because I'm not getting any TypeScript errors, right? Shouldn't I be getting a bunch of...
I wouldn't count on that. That only works on the files you have open, not on the files you don't have open.
You are correct.
Go on your right edit to create observable and click into that.
Okay, create observable, and then right-click the create observable, you said?
Set your cursor on it and press Shift F12.
Shift F12. Okay. These are all the usage?
Yeah, those are all the usages, so you can easily find where you actually call it.
I see. So it is in use observable state, but is also in a few other ones here.
Well, we are in use observable state, so let's just jump where you actually use it. No, you can click on it on the right in that little window.
Yeah, that's where it's used. That's where we were looking before.
So just do a double click and it will jump on the left to that place. Or it reopens it on the right.
Yeah, it reopened it for some reason. That's weird. Okay. I mean, we want to see where this is used.
Yeah, and then you have that in observable ref.
I was trying to avoid any re-renders, so I'm using ref to do it. I know it sucks. I wouldn't normally have mutations in my code. Yeah, I'm doing it for that reason, to avoid the re-renders.
Yeah, but I just mean you probably define the type where you define the use observable. I have that word on the tip of my tongue. I can't recall the word. It's about functions, what you can put in and what you cannot put in with type inheritance. Type inheritance can go in two directions.
We can run TSC on it? Oh, it opens PowerShell? That's weird. I don't know. Fine. It opens PowerShell.
I think you can use the drop down at the plus icon.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do that. I don't know what I usually use. I think I use Commander. CMDer, but this should work too. Okay, that tells me where I'm at. CD packages, and then one React, I think is the one. And then we can just do it from here. I would normally do yarn workspace, whatever. I'll just do this. And then we do yarn TSC, right? And that should catch it. There might be other errors though. I'm not seeing any.
There would be any, yeah, but as I said, you can always pass a function that doesn't take any arguments into a place where you have a function that takes an argument.
I can't tell you if these errors are related to this or not, but I can do
probably unrelated.
Yeah, I'm looking here. This one has a use field. Use field might have something. This is unrelated. This is one place I wanted to ask you. but these are unrelated. Oh yeah, did you know that some fields can hold array values? Multi-select fields also hold array values. So if you have a select and you put multiple on it here like this, and it would have children, this now the value here becomes an array. It's crazy. It's like not what I expect.
That's why you always want to access text value and number value and never really value on those things, or you're completely going to be confused.
Yeah, I mean, I handle all those things in my code, but yeah, it's a lot. Okay, so I'll just change this for now and be fine, because I'm not seeing any errors related to it. It looks like this didn't error. And it might be that the way I've used it since is better, and now I don't have that problem. But I kind of don't want to change it, because if it breaks something, I'm not going to remember. Might have been some reason. This is the whole thing I was going to get into, is that I was defining this return value, and then some of the functions are part of the return value in here. I've defined the types this way. Like, this is the subscribers ref, so therefore it is a subscribers ref. Yeah, the cancellators is not one. So I define it in there, and this one has an as for some reason, and I think I shouldn't have an as, now I think about it. This is the first one I converted, this first file.
Yeah, you can just put that into the generic of map.
Okay, great. So take this part and put it as the generic of map. That's even better. So many things I'm learning. I probably would have figured this one out, but when I first did this file, I didn't, and there must be some reason I did this. It can be a function that returns a function, so state setter or a void, which is undefined, I think. Yeah. So it wouldn't be void, it'd be undefined, I think, specifically.
You don't really need that part either, because essentially everything that a map can returns. Well, yeah, if you call map.get something, you can always get undefined back anyway, so you don't really need that, because TypeScript already takes that into consideration.
There might be some reason I did this, though. I don't want to break any code that I can't see. Yeah, use field has stuff, but I don't care about use. Let's look at that one later. I just want to do the files I have open. Okay, so this one I could change later. I can look at that. It's not hurting anything. This one, again, it said this is an implementation of this function, and then it will get exported at the bottom here as get value right there. So that's something I was doing. I don't know if this is a good pattern. I don't want to use classes, and I don't want to dependence on this or anything. So I wanted to use functions like I would be used to, but this is the only way I was able to accommodate that approach, where you could have functions in here that are not defined. They're just kind of like, I do define the type on them, like you saw with this map. This map was created on the fly. There could be a function in here that's not assigned to the observable subscriber value thing.
I think the only thing that I would do differently here is to make it a little more readable, that at the top of this function you could say something like type return type equals observable subscriber value, and then down here you can just write return type subscribe, which will make it a little more obvious when you scan that later and don't really have in mind what this method returns.
We did add this as the return type of the create observable.
Yeah, but I would just, like in line 8, exactly where we are, just enter a new line and you just create a new type that's just created inside your function. Now you just write type return type, or write whatever name you want to give it. Red, maybe. I don't know.
Something like this, you're saying?
And then you put it in here. Equals observable subscriber value.
Also put this in here? I don't need
without
these, though.
The
it would be parentheses.
And this would purely be for not repeating yourself further down, and like for assigning a name for something here.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially because you're scrolling so much in those files. If you just jump into it and you're in line 80 or in line 90 and you don't see what this function should actually return, then you immediately see what you mean. It's just more explicit for you to read.
Yeah, it sucks I have to duplicate this and this. There's no way to infer it looks like.
I mean, if you name it not return type but red or something, so you don't get that duplication.
Name what, this?
Just name it red for now. Like, give it a different name from return.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And on the right-hand side, you just write return type of create observable. That would be possible, but it's not making it a lot more readable. So I don't know if that's worth.
So I'll just duplicate the return type here.
Yeah,
and the only reason for this is just to be more clear for somebody reading this code that this is not just a random type. This is the return type.
Also, it makes it easier for you if you change it. So you don't have to change it in 5 to 6 points down there, or if you add additional properties on it or something like that. It's just a little bit more explicit.
Yeah, I could try that. I mean, it's some boilerplate, but it's my library, not like you're not dealing with this as a consumer. This is just to make my library slightly easier to read. Another thing that's weird about TypeScript is if I do this enter here, it complains. So typically in JavaScript, this is completely acceptable. You can put an enter here, and then you could just do. Also in JavaScript, if you wanted to, you could just do dot, right? But you can't do a dot here. It has to be in this format, specifically like this.
Yeah. Because you're working on a type here and not in a runtime thingy. On a runtime thingy, you could do that. If you do type of some path to some runtime value, then you can go the full path. But as soon as it's converted to a type, you have to use the accessor.
I see. So, I mean, this is definitely making it easier to read regardless. Hopefully, I can look at this and it tells me what it is. It tells me what props need to be on there. So, yeah. It's just we also have it gigantic right now because I'm trying to screen share. So, it's a little bit different. Yeah, like normally this would fit in one line in my editor and I wouldn't have this problem. Let me really quickly just see what that looks like. It didn't work. But this was probably more like what it would look like. Yeah, I would be able to read this pretty easy. If they were on different lines, it'd be even easier to read. It's just the problem is when you scroll in, the word wrap doesn't convert it to responsive. It's not responsive in the way it formats it.
Or if you don't hover over return type, but you hover over subscribers ref here. No, that's line 71.
71 for subscriber value. Yeah, so subscriber value is the current generic that's being passed in. I wouldn't be able to see that anymore from this point, and it's an array of subscribers. Okay, so but the thing is that with the previous code I had, I'm going to copy that and just put it back. All right, so we look at the subscribers ref here. So we're looking at this. If I change the return type back to what it was, when I look here, I know what subscriber value is because I can tell it's some generic probably that's being passed in. But when I switch it to return type, I no longer know that context because it's just like, where is this coming from?
Yeah, of course.
I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying like, what are the pros or cons of this if somebody wants to do this in their application? I'm going to keep it here though, because it's more clear to me that this is a return type. This is a part of the return type of the object that's in this function. With the way I'm doing this is kind of like a class structure. It's not really, but because I'm creating a function that creates an observable almost like a class, then this makes it more clear to somebody reading the file. Yeah, that's great. And we also learned that with the map, I should have put this in there. I bet you there's another example of me using a map, and I do use the generic on that one, but just not here.
It's always growing with new stuff.
This is a consumer of that observable, and this creates a hook out of that. So similar to how Tanner was doing his TanStack stuff, this is also, it's not headless, but the create observable is not part of React. And then the consumer of that is use observable state. This one does consume the non-React observable. And that observable is very simple. It just has a subscribe and publish and then a value. This is the consumer of it that creates a hook. I mean, this looks really complicated here, but this starts with the ref. We were talking about the return type. I bet there was a way for me to get the return type in here now. So I had return value as a function, which is this type. So I'm going to take this type, put it at the top at the function. So the function here is defined, and then you said after the arrow. It's not after the arrow, it's here, right? The return type of this is observable state, observable value. And then I can remove it down here and not have to worry about it. Just return it straight up. And then my code's cleaner. No, don't work. Translation. Publish value has already been declared. You can't declare it again. I'm doing something. Const. This should be returned. Okay, there we go. I love that translation. That was so good. Okay. Wow, this is great. I'm glad I had a subpar situation for myself because that is going to make it better for other people watching it too, who are probably in the same boat. And then they're going to look at like, oh, that's so cool. I see how that improved the thing he had. Yeah. Okay. So now we're at the top of this file. So we fixed that. This isn't any, which is weird. Why am I assigning a generic to any? There must be some reason there.
That's not assigning. You are giving the default value, assuming that this generic is not specified by the user and not inferable in any way. And here it would not be inferable.
There must be some reason.
I have to say, I would almost always avoid those default types because they kind of fall on your feet at some point. Or if you do it, do unknown, but not any. Because if someone wants to consume this, they're not going to get any error, no matter what they really work with in the end. So if you default to something, default to unknown.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense because, yeah, if I pass the wrong type and it can't infer it and I've set a default, then it's just going to be some random type and you won't have a clue what it actually is. Oh my God. That's so smart. Yeah. So what if I get rid of this? I'm curious what breaks my app.
You probably get a few errors where you don't pass in anything.
You said Shift F12?
Yeah.
And then I can see where it's used and I can just see if any of these have it passed in there without the generic. That has a generic. This one has no generic. So
if you open that now, it would probably be broken.
Okay. So we remove the any here. Oh, it can infer it though. No, it can't because
No, it can't. There's nothing to infer from.
It says unknown now.
But it automatically goes to unknown. Nice.
Oh,
or
okay.
Did you maybe not save the left?
No, it's saved. It's inferring unknown by... Well, I thought it would error that you didn't pass a generic. It says it requires one argument. Something like that. Let me change this real quick here. So if I get rid of this and save... I don't need to save though, right? It should just work. Yeah, unknown.
Yeah, that probably shifts a little bit from TypeScript version to TypeScript version. They're always adding some new behavior that makes sense. And this absolutely makes sense to me.
Yeah, if we look at this file...
It's unknown. If you're in a TypeScript file, it shows at the bottom of the screen. If you click on TypeScript down there.
This one here?
Yeah, or on the little...
Yeah, 482. Okay, so it's on 482.
It uses what ships with the editor, but you can set it to use the one from your library.
I see. Yeah, she really should use the workspace version, but it's fine. I don't mind 482. I want us to be on the latest TypeScript. The library didn't have it initially. It's fine. It doesn't break this. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page and whatever's... If we use TypeScript Playground, it's going to show up the same. So this one, it's unknown by default is how it's doing, and that's what you would recommend. But then these things have unknown, and that's not good. Would it change unknown to something else? If I go to publish, I would would most likely be publishing a Boolean here, right? So it's not able to infer that anymore. So I should tell it's a Boolean. I should very specifically say it's a Boolean. The question I have is, shouldn't it error that there's a missing generic?
I think at some point, like, they will error if you put in one generic, but it's required to have two or something like that. But I think for 0 generic point, it will just go to some sensible default, which would be unknown.
Weird. Yeah, I don't like that.
In the past, it errored, but it seems they changed that. Or you have some configuration in your tsconfig that's maybe causing that. No, you have strict themes on first look.
No,
okay.
Right?
No.
Okay.
I would have assumed a different behavior here, but
from my experience, I would have assumed a different behavior too, because it used to error on that stuff, which is probably why I added the any here as a default value. I don't know what's going on. All right, fine, whatever. That's actually really good you pointed out. So let's look for other situations where I might have done that. And there's one more, it looks like, where I did not call it with a generic, and that one's here. This one, error message state. So this one is going to be an array of error messages, most likely. Let's see if I can find out what I'm passing. Wait, hang on. We're looking for the publish value function, because that's going to tell you what type it's being used. I'm publishing an error message list, which is an any array. Okay, it shouldn't be an any array. That should probably be, oh, it's a JS file. Oh, okay, well then I'll fix it when I get there. Yeah. But it was an array. Hey, it's cool that it picked that up too, that it was an array, even though it was a JS file.
Yeah, it's really trying hard. That's a funny part of the whole thing. You essentially just write TypeScript types, but it even makes the experience better for your JavaScript users.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually one of the reasons I wanted it, is for anybody in JavaScript gets my intent, and I don't have to document as much either, because it's all documented through TypeScript already. It's much easier that way. Yeah. Some of these types, just looking at it, if somebody's not using TypeScript, I would not want to use TypeScript when I see this. Nothing about this is making me go, wow, that's so good. Wow, I really want to use TypeScript. It's all making me think, wow, this is extremely confusing and difficult and problematic. I would say to them, and I'll let you say it after, the thing I would say to them is that this is all about documentation. You're documenting your intent. You would have to write documentation on this anyway, and what you're doing is making it very clear that this is how I expect the code to work, and somebody consuming the code doesn't have as much overhead when they're doing it. It's mainly from the library author perspective. It's horrible. It's awful. You gotta do crazy voodoo magic to get this to work.
Yeah, I think that's really the distinction between a normal user and library user, because we want to provide that user experience in some way, to have everything kind of connected and have everything typed perfectly. But as a normal user, hopefully you will never write code like this. Because if you write code like this, you're not writing an application, you are already writing a library. And then you maybe should put it in a library and really work on it, like working on a library where you have like at least 2 consumers or 5 consumers or even thousands of consumers. And then you write for many people, and then you are that explicit. If you just write code for yourself, don't do that. And in the worst case, it's an unknown or something, and you do 2 more type assertions. And it shouldn't be necessary to do this in the first place.
Yeah, that's like the ideal. This kind of stuff I would have to explain the generic though, but in some other places it can be inferred, and
yeah, but
it should get
in this
easier.
case, it's very clear why you need it and what you need it for.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because it says like that's the state of what these are publishing and subscribing to.
Like, this is very forward going. Even as a consumer, you're like, yeah, of course, I want this to be with a Boolean. Let me be a little more specific about this. Yeah, it has to be documented at one point that it should be used like this, but from that point on, yeah, of course.
All right, so let's look at some other files then. So far, it's looking pretty good. It's not looking so bad. You're not pointing out bad things in the way I did most of this, and you even pointed out a spot where I was trying to do type inference, and you were like, oh, yeah, you don't need to there. That one, let's be specific about that return value. And even we duplicated that type just to be more clear again about the return value. Now, hopefully that won't bite me in the butt later, but it was working there. Anytime I duplicate code, I'm assuming that if you change it in one spot, it's not going to change it in the other spot. It could cause other effects, but you should hopefully see that in your editor.
Yeah, but that's why I like to keep that close to each other then. If it would be in multiple files, I would never suggest to do something like that. But here it's like 2 lines below it. Yeah, you're going to notice that. And especially when you change only one of the both, it will give an error because the return in the end will not match up anymore.
I see. So in this particular case, it's okay to duplicate because TypeScript will error if these are not kept the same.
Well, if one changes, then the return in the bottom will fail because of... Yeah, it's
red. Oh, yeah, it's all red. Already. Yeah, because one is taking a subscriber value, the other's taking Boolean. Let's see the translation here. I was expecting a type matching A, but instead you pass B. Okay. I mean, that's what we're expecting to see.
Oh, yeah, type has a property current are incompatible, like it's getting a good error here, actually.
Oh, this one here?
Yeah.
Type property current are incompatible. Yeah, but I don't know what current is.
That's
I know what it is.
Boolean is not.
Let me look at this one.
It's getting there, yeah.
Yeah, a type Boolean or null is not assignable to describer value or null. Okay. And actually, this generic thing is what made me kind of not want to finish this TypeScript conversion. It's not that I didn't finish it. It's just that it became so cumbersome. It's like, I don't have time for this right now. And so I got really far. If you look at the file view here on all the files that are TS compared to JS, there's still a lot of JS files, but most of them are, especially the backend pieces of it, all of those are becoming TS. Everything that is being depended on by some other file. So the way I did this conversion, and this might be important for people to understand too, is I started from the most deepest part of the code, which was the create observable, because everything is based on that. And so what I call those are leaf nodes. And I started the leaf node, and then as I changed those, I started any consumer of the leaf node would get changed. And then I would change the consumers of those consumers. And so you'd get into the branches eventually of getting toward that one form component where it eventually has all the state and consumes all the hooks, and then eventually goes to use field and things like that. I'm curious if one form itself got converted into a TypeScript file. That would be really interesting for me. No, it did not. It's a JSX.
Not yet.
So I haven't done it yet. Yeah, because the problem is if I change this file, it requires changing all of the sub pieces of it. Every hook that is being consumed would have to. Not this particular file.
The main problem you have here, if you start at the top and not at the bottom like you did, then everything you import from those JS files will kind of be any. So as soon as you change those JS files to TS files, they get their types, but those types might not be completely exactly what you anticipated in the beginning when writing your first TypeScript code. So all the time you jump back and forth between files because something further down will break something further up and you have to move it around again. So the way you chose it was like, do this file, then do this file, and you don't have to jump in between all the time. So that's really the right way to go about it.
That's good. Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better. Let's see what else we got here. So I want to look at different files. This one I don't think is that important. We've pretty much gone over most of it. It's this pattern I wanted to ask about. I can go back and change this to say the return value here. That's one change I can make. We already changed this return value here, and it's pretty much the same exact code as this right side. It's the, or well, not the right side, but the create observable function. It's pretty much this code. The difference is that it's the implementation for React. So that one we don't need to go over. One that's really bugging me is use field. And if we can fix that, would be amazing. Because use field is the one that's completely broken. Before we look at use field, I want to explain what use field consumes, because I thought it references use field data. So I want to look at that first. So use field data is actually an accumulation of many other hooks. There's all these different hooks here. And basically it was my use field is an opinionated way of doing this. This is the base itself, use field data. And it's very rare that somebody would ever need use field data. Very, very rare. But if you wanted to change the registration behavior or what a field is considered visited, stuff like that, you would go to this level and not the use field level. Because use field, I'm determining if a field is visited or not. I'm determining if your field is registered, and I do that amount, but I'm doing all that work for you. Whereas use field data lets you handle if you want to register your field and what that means. And registration basically says that in the form when you're doing validation, a field has to be both registered and visited to be validated. And that's how I've set my code up. And so if you want to change that behavior so that all fields are always visited, and then basically you would get the error as soon as you see the field, you would have to go at the use field data level, because that's the only way to get that. And you would register it again at mount, which is what I do, but you might change some of the behavior. You might not want it to register ever, which means it would never validate that field. You might have a special use case for that. So those are reasons why you might have use field data versus use field itself. So this is use field here. This is what you would actually probably want to use, but there are ways to get out of it with use field data behind the scenes, because that's what I'm using. And also, if you notice here, I put some comments on some of the the args here, and then when you go to consume these, you would see that documentation. So if I look real quick in field, which it has not converted yet, but it should show up still as long as the VS Code is set up with that. Okay, do one of these. Should show it here or on the property name.
If you go up, hover over like 56 or something.
One issue I noticed when I was documenting, talking about so many things that are not related yet, but this is my documentation on use field itself, but there's no information about the parameters of it.
Hover over a parameter?
Yeah, and the parameters do have documentation. So I did add the documentation for the parameters, because this is user facing, so I wanted this to be documented. But the main thing was that I could put this documentation at the top here with, see, I have this at warning. I could add at param, and then put the documentation for that particular parameter at the top here.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
It did show it. It just didn't associate it with the parameter itself. Yeah. What should I do to have that documentation where if you're looking at use field and you want to see which parameters exist and what they are, how would you see that as well as on each property?
You would just see it as soon as you start using it.
Okay, so the way I did it is the correct way.
Yeah, because especially those are not really parameters. This is just one object that has many values. So you could say like param and then put one type in there. But that would still be a type that needs to expand it somehow. And then you have essentially a browser in your little pop-up there to get to that point and follow like 10 links. You wouldn't want to do that. I don't know how they would implement that. So this is the way to go about it, yeah.
Okay. I would like it if TypeScript did have these. Like it would see that, each of these exists, that they have documentation inside of the use field. Then you could get, like you were saying, a browser, like you click on a hyperlink and it would get you to the next one. You could see first you have to click on the object because you're saying this is an object being returned. So there would be one parameter, which is the object itself. It's currently unnamed because it's deconstructed. And then the second one would be all of the properties of that object. It would have to do a lot of different things. So if we see here, I've got some red in here. One is on the set value, and I want to know what the error is. So we do the translation first. I was expecting value type or function that takes a value or undefined and then returns a value type or undefined, and then or undefined is the value you can set it to. But I passed one that looks a little bit different here. It takes a value type or string, so it returns a string, boolean, or in any array.
So essentially string, boolean, or any array do not match a value type because value type in this case is yet unresolved. You're working with a generic that is not anything yet at that point, if you want to say it like that.
This does not take a generic. So how would I...
Yeah, but further up the tree, you get that generic in that's value type. Value type is like something we don't know yet.
Is it something where I need to do this here?
No.
Okay. I haven't seen this code in a while. It feels like you're reading it faster than I am.
The thing is, in line 160, you want to specify a return value for this function of type value type.
Yes, or undefined.
Value type or undefined, yeah.
Okay, so I have to specify that though, which is this value type or undefined. And when I do this, I don't do this since I...
And now you will probably in that function down there get problems.
So now that we've defined that down to the bottom, now we're having issues.
Yeah, that's the problem. We're still inside that function from the nesting level, right?
Yeah.
And then it says, I don't know what value type is or will actually be in real life.
And you're saying it's an
but
any
you're
array
definitely
here.
returning an array here.
Yeah.
And it could be the case that value type is never going to be an array, but it's string, and then this code would be wrong. And there you are really at that library author dilemma, because you're writing generic code, but you're writing explicit code that should somehow do generic behavior, but there's no way of telling this correctly to TypeScript. So you can really just say as any here, or just define upstairs.
I mean, I could do that to cheat it, but no, that doesn't work either.
Not in there, I think. We would have to do it in multiple times. Yeah, after this.
Is it either here? No, it's this one.
One further out, yeah, the yellow one.
So that fixes that. But that's me cheating it, and I don't want to cheat it.
You can't get around that, because you don't know what the user in the end put in the generic. That's just not possible. So this is one of those points where you say you write code that's so generic that it cannot be correct code from a pure type perspective. You just have to put out the big hammer and say, yep, I know this is not perfectly type testable code, but I, as a library author, decide this is okay, that we cannot get closer to type correctness than doing this. And it's very unsatisfying to do it for the first few times, but there's really no real way around it, because how could you do that?
Yeah, that's why I stopped here. This is where I stopped, because I was like, I have no clue what to do. I don't want to cheat it, and so I don't know how to get around it.
No, you really have, because this generic will get its generic type when that function is being used. That could be 500 years in the future. The compiler can't check against that. You really have to override the assumption here. And there are just those points.
Let's say someone passed it in a generic here and the type being returned here doesn't match. That it's not going to error for them. They're not going to know. But so then I have to make sure I did it correctly.
For me personally, I'd say every time you write an S like this, it's a good indicator for you to write one more test.
Yeah, like or an if check or something. Yeah. The problem is this test, if I look at use...
No. I mean a real test, like testing the behavior.
Yeah, I don't have a test for this particular hook, which is weird. I have a test for every other hook, but this particular one doesn't have a test. I think it's what it is field has tests. The field component, which consumes this, has tests. But the use field hook itself doesn't have tests, because it's the same thing. This is testing the exact same behavior, but it's testing it at like a DOM level. It's very similar, but it's not exactly the test. Yeah. So I would need a test for this particular function to make sure that it's doing what we would expect to have happen. But the thing is, I would pass value type in there when I do it. So let me see what value type is. We're looking way up at the top here, because this is where the thing is going to... Value type is, by default, I put string, because that would be the default, but you're saying not to do that. I don't know. I don't want to change it right now, but let's see. Field has not been converted. So.
Yeah, and I think in a case like this, it's probably also okay, but you'll see. But the point is just really, you can't know right now how it's going to be used. So get to that break between nice types and reality.
Let's be very clear so people understand why we need this as here, and be very, very clear about everything here. All right, so I have a set value function. The set value function is coming from, I have no clue where it's coming from, but it's probably coming from I think it's all the way back to that create observable. That's the only reason this would make sense. So this is most likely coming all the way back to that observable. And basically what might be a little difficult to understand in these types here is that the value I'm expecting to come in is of type value type. It could be undefined, but it could also be value type. And what is value type? Value type is a little confusing, but it's the type of this value. And you're like, okay, so the type of this value is what's coming in or undefined. So it either has a value or no value. And the type of this is what somebody has defined as part of the generic that they're passing in. They know what the type is. I have no freaking clue what that type is though. And what we're saying is the return value is also that value or undefined. And it sounds like, oh, you're just returning the value again. No, I'm returning the same type of the value, but not necessarily the value itself.
Yeah, down there you could do better. Here you can do a value type array here, and that would be correct, more correct.
Oh, value type like this?
No, instead of the string. So you need the as.
I see. You're saying to be more specific here, I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be a string array though. It would 100% at this point have to be a string array, but I could do value type array as well.
That's true.
What if value type is not as in a string array though? Can I do this? Because if value type is a string array, then that fixes that problem.
Probably could be.
I keep hovering it like it's going to tell me something, but it just makes it even more.
You can also do as type of value.
Like this? Value.
Type of value, yeah.
Which is value type or undefined, which is even more correct.
Yeah, it's even more correct, but
an array of type of value.
Make it more readable. That's the problem here. You could also remove that as here.
I can remove this as. So I basically want a default value. In this case, what I'm basically, the only reason they're parentheses is because of all this extra as stuff. What I'm doing here, if you can tell, is that I'm saying if the value is an array, return the value. Otherwise, return an array because I need a default value for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you go up there to line 173, in the middle of the screen here, yeah.
Okay.
And here you are a little bit more explicit about the type, and you just say this is of type value type, like colon value type.
Yeah. Or undefined. So it would be, it's value type or value, which I think type of value is the same thing here.
Or that, yeah. Then you can get rid of that down there, and it will also kind of work, I think.
Yeah, that seems like it figured it out. But what's this? It thinks it's never.
Yeah, the never down there. The thing is, when you make an empty array in TypeScript, it's always a never array because it has nothing inside.
That's why I typed it with the as.
And you just need that cast in that point, in that place. Yeah, probably.
Okay. So this is good because the whole point of this was to discuss why you might need an as. I like type of value here, but I don't want to keep doing it because I feel like it's going to slow the processing of TypeScript down for some reason. If I know what value is here, I shouldn't have to define what value is. So here, even type of value would be the return type. Whatever comes in is going to be what goes out.
Oh, that could be a bit problematic. Yeah, this is, yeah, now it's a little bit too circular.
Oh, okay, so that fixed it though. Weird. But I can use type of value for all these other places because that's what it is. This array is going to be whatever value was. And then down here, I do need to typecast it still to type of value.
Yeah.
And then
even though I personally would probably prefer the value type, but I don't really know why I would. It just would.
Well, it was not value type though. It's value type or undefined.
Yeah, that's true.
It wouldn't be undefined here though. This one is defined. It's defined as an array of value type. This one, I do like the value type better. I agree. So I'm gonna leave that there. And then this one, same thing. It's an array of value type because this is never gonna be undefined. It's actually probably, I bet at the bottom here, there's something where it becomes undefined or something, or they set the value specifically to undefined would be where it is. That would be this else here where they set it to undefined. Every other place, it's gonna be value type. It's never gonna be undefined. So that makes sense. You're not removing the value until the user explicitly removes the value for some reason. They might call the setter. This function might not ever be undefined. It might be that the type of the set value could be undefined, but in this function, it will never be undefined. If I change this to this, it's going to complain about other things because now it could be undefined or something, right? Like I'm not defining the return value correct.
Seems okay, or now it cannot return undefined, and
yeah, now it says
one argument.
The function you're trying to call needs 0 arguments.
Wait, that's not a return type here. You're still in a function definition.
What did I do wrong?
Or can you undo what you did? I'm a bit confused right now.
I just wanted to change it so value type is the return type of the function and not have this undefined because I don't think it'll ever be.
That function will return undefined in your case at the bottom.
It will?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
Case,
Else could potentially, but I don't think it will. I think it returns whatever the user passed. Oh, which could be undefined. Okay.
Which could be undefined.
Okay, so that's fine. I'll just leave it there. They shouldn't pass undefined, but they can. It allows them to do it. We fixed this one. I mean, this is still here. We're more clear about what it is. And then we've also defined this even more clear. Do I have to do this, though? I think this can be inferred now. So,
I think now it can be inferred, yes.
Yeah, it can be inferred. Yeah. I love how it says equals string, which is not. It would not be a string here, but that's just the default if you don't pass it in. And that's mainly because right now the field's not TypeScript yet. I could probably remove that later. So here's another one. Target checked. Now it's going to be a Boolean or an array of Booleans. In this case, because we're in this part right here, this if statement, we're already doing this. And I have like a nested if statement here.
Why are we right on concat?
Concat doesn't
because here you're not specific anymore that it's an array, because we've put it out to value type again, which could be string or anything else.
Yeah.
So maybe go up there where you...
Here. It's not an array of value type. Value type just could be an array.
Yeah, but here we know value array is an array, right?
We should know. It says value type, but it should be an array because we're checking if it's an array, return it. Otherwise, make an array that is value type. So it should...
Yeah, but line 184 just says as value type and not anymore that's also an array. So here we would have to be more... You cannot do another as here.
I know, just making fun.
But you can be more specific here, any array. That would mean like...
Yeah, it would be...
It would essentially narrow down value type to everything in value type that's an array.
What if I do this? Because that's what I had before, string array.
You had only string array before, not...
Yeah, but I want to narrow it down because I think it would be a string array at this point. It would not...
Then you don't need the value type and there anymore.
Oh, I see. Yeah, any array makes more sense. I think this is more correct for what I'm doing in the code. Because you could pass an array of anything. I don't care. On my job.
Or you could use the extract type here.
Extract type from here?
Yeah, that's a little bit more explicit, I think.
This?
Only extract, and then you put in that value type there, and as a second argument, you put in any array.
Okay, so this is better, right?
Pretty much exactly the same, but for me, it's more readable because it's more explicit. It just takes the subtype that are assignable to any array. So it puts all the array types out of value type.
Yeah, I like that. I like that better. What's weird is I don't have to do it up here because it already does value type and any array. Okay, wow, interesting.
Yeah, because in 181, the array check essentially does that.
This is an any array.
So if you hover over the value in 181,
it still says value type
that happening.
Yeah.
And the extract essentially does the same. It's just more readable for me here.
Okay, which would break the types. Okay, great. Yeah, I'll take this. This is going to be a tough one to kind of come across, but the whole point we're saying is like why you need an as. This is a situation where you need an as because it's not clear. Anytime you define an array, it's always a never array.
Yeah.
And so you have to use the as to define what the intent is of this array.
Yeah. TypeScript never can know what that is. I think next version will change the never array to an unknown array, but...
it's still not good enough for me. I want an any array or an array specific to the type that I'm using here. You know, it's like I gave you an array. If it's already typed, just assume what the type. The problem is I want to define this. Let me see if I can do this. You can't do this. If I called a function like this, could then I define...
Nah.
I can't. I'm thinking like new array, something like this. You know, and so you do this, you pass the generic here of the type you intend it to be or something like that.
You could do that, I think, but it's so out of the JavaScript world to write new array.
I know, yeah, but I could do new array, right? And then pass the generic, and it should... Can we try real quick?
Yeah.
Let's see. So I do new array here, and I take the generic, and then I have to call it first. Actually, you don't have to call it, right? Well, I'm going to do it anyway, but I thought in JavaScript you don't have to call.
Yeah, but then you get parsing errors, I think.
So I do this, and I'm at this out, and then I put that into here. Should work. And we check this. No, this time it thinks it's an array of value type. My bad. The value type itself is the array.
Yeah.
This would be a little hard. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, let's just not do that part.
Okay. Good to explore options, though. I'm learning a lot here. So, okay, we'll go down further. These are all arrays. This is an array of if it's checked. I have no clue what's going on here. And then I have tests for all these things, so I know that there are definitely tests, and I have Cypress tests for these as well. So value, array, filter, subvalue. Okay, yeah, we're basically removing a value. There's no reason for this to be a dot filter except for it's cleaner code. It's one function that you call versus a dot find, and you got to remove it out of the array and then find the index and whatever. Instead of doing that, I just did the filter. It's fine.
Yeah.
There's only like 3 values in here. It's not going to break.
I feel like in line 210 we don't need the type assertion
anymore. After we've done all that work. Yeah, let's see. Nope, something's wrong. Any array is not assignable to value type, but we extracted.
Yeah, okay. Then we apparently still need it.
It's trying to assign it to value type, which is the return value, but we're basically wanted to be extracting to... It's not as value type. It's as value type that is any array. Hang on, the wrong one. It's this one. Same thing here. We're specifying that this
Yeah.
value type is an array value. We don't know what's in it, but it's an array value. And here I'm doing not equal. Yeah, that's assuming something. Here it says this target value is a string. Sub value and target. So if target value is a string, it's a string array. Why is target value string? Let's find that out. Because the event will pass a target value. It's expecting an event. There's a portion of code up here that we should have looked at a second ago. This, when it says set value event, this is not actually an event. It's named event because that's what I named the argument. But at this point, then see if type of is not equal to an object. Basically, if it's an synthetic event, that is where it goes down to this part. If it's not a synthetic event, then it's value type, right? Then I'm just going to set it right there. So there's where you can get your undefined. So when you're down here, it's a string array, 100% string array. So it's what I had before, right? Then here, this would be a string array instead of value type. So that would have been fine. And then I don't need the s here anymore because
You still need an s because the return will otherwise be a little bit off.
This is string array here.
Yeah, you can do that.
This one's fine. I'm just saying my intent. And then this should say it's a string array or a value type and any. So value type and any is the problem. The type of this is that extract thing.
The problem is that value type could still be also an array of numbers or something, and then it's confused.
Yeah, but if it's array of numbers is wrong. Can't pass me that.
Well, you haven't restricted value type in any way up there, or?
I see up at the top here. Wait, somewhere in this function. I have no clue where it is, but
I would probably control click where you...
Sorry, I have it. I swapped them.
So essentially, we have to restrict it to a few types that are actually possible here. So because right now the user can put number array in here, even if in reality that's not possible because
you can put number array. You can. If it's a JavaScript event, it can't be a number array. It has to be a string array. So let's find the spot. When a synthetic event comes in, I know what that is versus if it's just the value itself. Yeah, you could put a number array in there. It's going to work fine. The difference is it will just set it. Whereas if it's coming from JavaScript, a synthetic event, then I'm handling that differently. And that's just because I'm blindly passing in an onChange. And so the onChange could be a custom one that you've written. If that's the case, I'm expecting you to at least just have the value as the first arg. Otherwise, by default, it would be a synthetic event. So maybe the code here needs to change. I just always expect a JavaScript event. I don't handle this by default. But if I do that, it's going to have to change a lot of things because remember I have that translating function where you can translate the props and rename them essentially from what I expect to what you expect. But I have this built-in assumption of HTML prop names. Simply shifting the prop name isn't going to make this work anymore. You would have to write your own custom onChange function, which basically takes the value and passes it in. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's what we want. For those strange cases, instead of having to use my function to do the onChange, which has all this extra logic in it here, at that point, maybe you should just write your own. Like mine only is meant to handle the HTML. And so a rewrite of this, it would break functionality that's current there today. You would have to update yours. But where I have update field value, you would want access to the set value function yourself, and you would manually do that. So in field, right now, I don't give you access to the set value function. But if I wanted to, I could give access to the set value function right here, set value, as a breakout in case you needed to set it yourself. So instead of calling my HTML specific update field value, you would have your own set value function. And then, it's kind of confusing here, but this translate props would get that set value function. It would go into this.
I love this. You know why?
Why?
You're going so much into what TypeScript actually does to many things. Like you're in JavaScript and you write this function that can take like 20 different things, and depending on how exactly you use it, it has 8 different meanings and stuff like that. And when you start writing TypeScript, it's like, if I do this, I'm writing types until my fingers are bleeding. But I could also just write 3 or 4 different functions that are much more specific, and I write almost no types, and it's working wonderfully. And what you get in the end is essentially much clearer user interface, which much more defined behavior, because you don't have that one thing where you can possibly put anything into, but you use this for that purpose, you use this for. And TypeScript really makes you write those clearer interfaces because they're just easier to write. And that's happening to you right now, and it's totally interesting to watch.
I was hoping you weren't smiling about this translate props thing, but that's great. Yeah, this is what it would be expected. Okay, so I'm like, right now I want to do that. This is actually a very quick change I can make, is to put the set value. I'm going to forget about it after this call if I don't do it now. So basically the set value is a possible export now, and I go all the way down here, and there's like a bunch of crap here for other reasons that the value has to be whatever. Now that can potentially change as I go forward, but I don't know. But then I just provide that set value, and then I don't have to deal with it. Value still has to be weird, because even if you set it to whatever, it can come out as something else. But use field might be like change the use HTML field or something like that. And then there would be a separate, like I said, use field data. If you want to go on your own and go rogue, you do it with use field data. Don't bother me with what I'm doing. But because I want to allow it to be more flexible, I'll at least allow this function export here so that it can be translated. And that's the one thing. So that gets exported and now it should be in the translation. I just want to make sure there's the translation. It needs to be down here too then. It should be complaining, but my hooks aren't erroring for some reason after I updated the TypeScript. I'm not getting the React hooks errors anymore with ESLint. It must be actually it's a VS Code issue.
I don't see ESLint running right now.
How do I make sure that runs?
It would say ESLint at the bottom of your screen, so probably you don't have the extension enabled.
There's an extension for ESLint?
Yeah, ESLint is an extension.
I thought it just magically worked. I see. It is installed.
No, but it's on.
So I have it, but it's not working with this project. And there could be multiple reasons why. One, it is a monorepo, and it might not be looking at the correct
Always show status might be interesting, because then it will be at the bottom of the screen all the time. And cannot read config file, cannot find module. So something there is crashing. You should probably look into that.
But I never had this in Sublime Text, so I'm a little curious. This might be interesting to look into as well. It's a separate topic though. First things first, let's remove the existing functionality here for it to be a non-synthetic event here, so that it's always a synthetic event. And we can remove this extra if statement now. This first one here can go. Find where the end of it is. The regions don't seem to work that well with this. It should close the if right down here. This had an else here. I don't know why it would if.
Yeah, that's
so that's somewhere else.
That's
this one,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then just take all this and tab it back. Well, this is making me feel better. This is the one thing I wanted to talk about because I was stuck here and I wanted a way to go forward. So I think by reducing some pieces of it, we're helping a lot. It's just some pieces though. We haven't gotten everything yet, but we're even hearing like, hey, this is the place you have to use as. Okay, great. I mean, it's still depressing because I wanted to not use it, but the fact that there was a situation where I had to use it and it makes sense to use it there, that's the part I like the best.
Yeah, it feels creepy and everybody always tells you not to use as, but it's totally fine sometimes. It's also fine to use any. If it's like a place in the code you never touch and that's super complicated to type, then any is fine. Those are just indicators that you have to test that part of the code better.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you just have to write more unit tests in those cases. And so here I have else if input value is undefined. So if the value on the input right now is undefined, which would happen if you don't define an initial value, then it is undefined, or it's a string or a boolean. So that's at this point in the code. If it is a boolean, then return it as is.
Yeah, and here you have the problem. If the first half of that statement wouldn't be there, it would work, but with the second half of the statement, it doesn't.
This one here?
No, if the first half would, if you comment that out, you will see it's working.
So value is, I think, the current value that's being set to in the change handler. So when a change occurs, this is the new value. The input value, I think, if I remember correctly, this is the value that was passed in. Okay. So
yeah, and we just don't have, like, TypeScript doesn't know of that connection between those two types. So here it should assume that it's valid A then, or not. I'd say again, it's one of those situations where you just know better than the compiler, and it's okay.
Well, so here's something I'm noticing wrong too, though. If the input value is undefined and type of value, type of value is Boolean, 100%. So if the initial value was undefined, but now we got a Boolean, then this should return a Boolean, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing here, is I should return a Boolean.
That is a Boolean.
It is a Boolean. My bad. Okay, that didn't work. Well, we can go back here. Let me make sure real quick I got it tabbed correctly. Let me make sure I didn't break it. Okay, great. We go back to this spot. So this one I have to use as again because it can't tell that value type is supposed to be a Boolean here.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's a way to write this. It's really weird though. Something.
As value type, not as Boolean.
Oh, as value type? Oh, yeah, because we're assuming value type's a Boolean here. Okay. And then this else here is string is not assignable to value type. Same issue.
Yeah.
And this is not my fault, actually. This is the HTML problem. So I was thinking of something when we were talking about refactoring, because as soon as you said that, I said, oh, maybe I should refactor it. What I have here is one long function with lots of if checks. And what I'm thinking is I should have different functions that take an event and then deal with that event. And so here's how you deal with this event if it's an array, which would be a multiple selection. HTML supports all this native. Here's how you deal with this event if it's a Boolean. Here's how you deal with this event if it's an array of checkboxes. Here's how you deal with it text, just regular text. And so I'd have 4 or 5 different functions that this would call, and then this would do the if check around which one to use. And then that would assist with typing.
Yeah.
And it would be probably easier to read because this is not easy to read the way it is. Even if I try to close this, there's a lot of stuff going on in here.
Yeah, but generally, I think the point is that in here, you always know things the compiler doesn't know. Like you have assumptions based on things that you can observe here, and there are just connections between those different parts that your TypeScript compiler can never know.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going rogue here, but so I don't want to do this as value type because this is obviously wrong. It's complaining here that this is string or true?
It will complain about a lot of things. It will complain that the string down there is not value type because it could have been initialized by the user with Boolean. It will complain about the true is not value type because it could have been initialized by the user as string. So essentially,
target value is the value off the target. That's what that is. So, and then this is actually current target now, but the target value is the value off the target, which is it always a string or is it a Boolean? Because I'm pretty sure this would be a Boolean if it's a checkbox. So how did it infer that this is a string?
No, value is always a string for even for a checkbox, because you would go we would use checked then.
I think this is a bug in my code that we're seeing here, is that if it's checked, right, then I need to set it to true. But look at here, if it's not checked, I set it to quote. So I'm expecting target value to be a string. It is a string, but it says or true. Is it assuming something about this input value? No, that's a string. Or a Boolean. That could be a Boolean. So if this is true, then it would use this value. If input value is false, then it would use whatever's in target value.
The question is, why are you not just returning as target checked here?
Because I can make a Boolean out of this, right? There must be some reason. Oh, so with a checkbox, there's a value field in it. The value could be a string, and the checked property could be true or false. So sometimes the value property could be true or false, or the check property could be true or false. I know this is like form library author kind of stuff, but so if the if the value they gave me could be a string or Boolean, right? Because it could be the check property or it could be the value property. Yeah. If it's a string value, I need to return a string from it. This is probably correct. I just do it because this code will work, and I do have tests for this. So
there's just no way static type analysis will ever get.
Yeah, and it's not my fault though. This one's HTML, not my fault. I didn't create this. I just had to write the code to make it work. Oh my god. Okay, so then this is another one.
It's a shame that the authors of browsers never thought about TypeScript.
Yeah. But I mean, they were using type languages though. Behind the scenes, everything is types. I don't know what they're doing magic-wise. If I could just copy the HTML types, that'd be great. It'd be so good. So this one, argument of type string or true, is not assignable to parameter of type value type. Same issue here. It looks like.
Yeah.
But how do I do the as here on this one? Because now we're doing a setter. I mean, the way I would write this is like that, and then as here, and then do one of these guys as value type.
That's a double as.
Yeah, it's the same problem we had before with the input or the target value. Such a weird situation. I have to write that. I wonder if I have that down here too. So this is the same. It doesn't know it's an array. That's what's going on here. String array is not equal to value type. Yeah, and so we just basically have to say the string array is a value type.
Yeah.
I feel like you gave me some evil power here, and I'm just using it for good. But I don't know if it's really for good yet or not.
Well, the other thing that you could have done is you go up in your function definition and just say as any, but then it would also swallow every single error that you might have here. So it's much better that you are specific on each return that you, you think about every as here. You're not plastering it in, you're really going through, oh, I'm doing this here and that there, and yeah, that has a reason. And then you are explicit and say, yeah, I know better than the compiler. Like, still has a value that you think about it and that you obviously see that this is a part of the application where we have to be careful and not just do anything. So even writing it has a value for you here.
Okay, yeah, I'm still looking at every function while I do it. And the good thing is I do have tests because this was originally JavaScript. In fact, when I did this project, all I wrote was tests for the longest time. And I think it was like video 4024 or something when I was building this, that I finally saw my code work for the first time without writing unit tests. I did this test driven for the first time ever. So this one, I'm going to convert this file to TypeScript and now see what errors. This is where the real thing happens. This is the consumer of use field, and we're going to see how that fares. So let me rename the file, and we're going to rename it to TSX, and I'm going to export. So hang on, right now it's a default export like this. And do you think...
No, it was not a default export.
It exports it down at the bottom as a default export. Ooh, I need to rewrite this code to work for a non-default export, but if I leave it as is, it should be fine.
I mean, you need a few types in there, but it should probably work.
Yeah, let me look at another one I've done. Field values, not TSX. I gotta have a TSX somewhere here in one of these error messages. I'm gonna copy paste. Like, there's no way I'm gonna write this from scratch. Form. Okay, form and field. Wait, this is field. Oh, I just made it. It's form. Okay, form is the brand new one. Okay, so this one here is a... Oh, I was doing something weird here. I don't know who helped me with this. I don't know if it was you or another guy on Twitter. This translate prop. I needed to know the type in it at in the variable. So like there's a prop, right? And so for a React component, you can't define a generic for a React component. I was able to create a generic and know what the type is. So I needed to know what the type of the submit form or the on submit was. Something like that.
You can totally do generics for React components.
I don't remember what I was doing here. I can't remember, dude. This is so confusing to me. Return type. I needed the return type, which was inferred. It has to be inferred that there's a return type by using the form on there, and then get that for the type of the submit function or something like that. Okay, I'm not going to mess with it. I've just wanted to copy paste but I can't copy paste because this one's wonky. So I'm going to have to basically add types here manually. And so you recommended not using the React function for function component?
Yeah, I like to be more specific because then you can make it generic and stuff like that, which would not be possible if you do the React.fc.
Okay, that's why. Okay. I would copy paste. The thing is, I have them in a different library where I wrote all my React components. They're not in this library. Okay, this one's a Boolean. The next one's a Boolean. This one's a function that returns stuff. And this one is...
it's pretty much any, but you can also just do a React node, yeah.
It has to be actually a specific kind of React node. So when you're cloning, I have to actually have a very specific syntax. I'm going to load up another editor, which you can't see real quick, and I'm just going to copy something out of it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're going to be in a weird spot here. Okay, I'm looking for one with a cloning in it. Okay, so this is what I have to do when cloning is that weird syntax. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It has to be an element specifically. So import that, and then I'll import this one. Okay, let's see if that worked. Everything looks good. Sometimes it's weird when it does it. And I can get rid of prop types. That's one thing here. Go all the way down at the bottom. Get rid of this.
Yeah, I love that moment. I love that moment.
Oh, when I got rid of the prop types?
Yeah.
Then, oh man, I don't know yet. Okay, well, we'll look at that in a second because that one might not be converted yet. This one is the one I want to look at. So I have to return this, which is actually the type of everything that was passed from use field. So it's the type of the return value from use field. Translate props, I am calling it, and then the return value is whatever they have set. They're setting what translate props is. That's what the other file was, the form one was doing, with because it has a translate in there. This is the default of it.
But that's of course not the correct type for it. So
this is the type right here.
Yeah, it's not a real type at all.
So this, I think this is why it was
it's just the same signature as use field, or am I wrong here?
So I don't know if the form component has a different signature for this. So this says use this, otherwise if it returns an undefined value, because it always calls it. There's no question mark dot. If I add the question mark dot, it might make it even easier, but it always calls it, and then if it doesn't return any value, then do this. That's basically like if the user did this function incorrectly, this is what's going to happen. And maybe I shouldn't do that. I'm just saying this is what did happen. And then this one is that if they call, same thing, same code. So the reason this is doing this declare and stuff here is because this is how I was declaring the props on it. And
you only return that, declared that one prop that's interesting for you here, which is submit form, and returning return type. But here you call it with a lot more, so you have to give that much more function. You have to give it a function with a lot more arguments, or with a lot more typed arguments.
So this should actually be one of these. No, because that will break. That'll cause infinite re-renders. I need to create a default props here, and then its translate props is going to be, I'll just do this, get that out of the way. There. Oh, okay. Should be, that's fine. That's a different issue. I'll figure that one out later. And these are gone. So the problem I'm having here is that this needs to have a return type on this function needs to be dependent on the type that they passed in. So if we go, it's this one here. So this is how I did it before, is that basically you pass me a function, I'm giving you this, and this is the type of submit form. But the return type is one that you give me. And that's why I did it with this weird declare function form type kind of thing. So that when you're doing the GSX, it can infer that if they pass in this function, then the return type of that function is the return type of the prop.
Yeah.
Do I have to do this?
You could, pretty much. You don't need the declare function part here. You can just put a generic up there. Your implementation, you just have field on line 21, left of the yellow parenthesis, you just start a generic here, and you say, yeah.
Oh, I did it again. Hang on, I have to delete. Okay, there we go.
And you put just your return type in here, and then you reference twice down there.
Oh, so I see. So in here, I basically, this is return type or void. I'm just going to put what I had in the other one, just to make it the same. I must have tested that one. Okay, so it's return type or void. And then here, these props are the return type. How do you do the return type again? There's some way to get the return type from a function?
By using the return type. You're overriding that very useful name, unfortunately, here.
Oh, you're saying, so this is actually a thing, and I've just overridden it.
I think you need to restart your editor so it really recognizes you're in a TypeScript file, because here you renamed a JavaScript file to a TypeScript file, and I think that didn't really reload the editor.
I think it is now. I just killed it, and then, here, let me just open
it. It's behaving very much like a TypeScript, like a JavaScript file still.
Weird. So I appreciate you meeting with me and spending the time on that. I want to let you have your final words on TypeScript and the conversion process and the library author piece.
You're seeing the process here. It is a bit weird to translate something that was JavaScript in the first place and then slap TypeScript on it. In some places, it feels just like it doesn't really fit, but that's normal. And it's definitely possible to convert that code. You just have to rethink everything again. Like that process that you would have had in the first place in the beginning when you write it. Now you're forced to just to do that second half without writing the actual code. And that's a little bit weird. But on the same time, you revisit everything. Maybe you notice an error here and there. That's something that I've seen a lot converting code bases to TypeScript. You notice a lot of edge cases left been right that could have gone wrong. And I mean, your code is tested very well, so that's not happening that much. But in a normal project where maybe stuff was rushed here and stuff was rushed there, that's always something that comes up where you're like, yeah, oh, now I have to think the first time about what happened when the user puts in an undefined here or something like that. So that's just very interesting to watch. And it's also interesting to watch you learn all of this, rethink it all the time and rethink it. So I think, yeah, it's really good content. People are going to pull something out of this and learn from something out of this. And maybe also like learn that part where, yeah, that's frustrating the first time. That's okay. That's not a bad thing, or you're not stupid or anything. That's just like stuff clashing with expectations you had the first time when you heard about TypeScript, and it might be completely different at that library author level, which is really, really different. So I think having videos out like this where the user really sees, okay, I'm not alone with this, that's not so crazy, that's normal. We need to normalize that more and put that out more, because otherwise you just see those 5 TypeScript wizards that just chuck around their generics of 5 level on Twitter, and you're like, okay, and where do I start? And this process is totally interesting, and it's good to go over this and say, yeah, it's okay to use an S here. Yeah, it's okay to be more explicit or less explicit here. I feel that it's important that we talk about those things, and it's been a ton of fun to talk about this right now.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it even from Twitter, because mainly I'm frustrated and I'm just by myself struggling to figure this out, and being able to, have you help me out. And it's not just you, there are other people helping me out too. I don't want to just say it's you. Getting that help is makes you less frustrated, especially because I went in this head first with like from scratch projects for work and as like side projects, and I'm gonna do TypeScript from scratch and not have any existing code to look at, and now I have to figure out how to get it to work. And then now I'm also to the level where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna convert my library. That's not a simple thing. Like you said, it wasn't designed for it. So now I'm trying to make it work, and that's probably the hardest way I think to get TypeScript started, is when you have an existing project. I wouldn't recommend this for the faint of heart. It's not a quick and easy way from this point, because I'm doing the underlying code. There's no dependencies here. It's all my code, 100% my code. That makes it extremely difficult to do these conversions. So I really appreciate that you've spent even time to help me with this small pieces of code that I've done here to show, what I did well, what I didn't do well, what I can improve on, which there's a lot, it seems like, to improve on.
One thing that I would want to get out is really like, people shouldn't be alone with this. Like, if you get to the point where you're like, oh, what on earth am I going to do with this? Go out in one of the Discord channels. There's the TypeScript Discord where people are 24/7 to really interact and help and answer questions. Also, Matt Pocock, that we were talking about earlier, has his own TypeScript Discord where also a lot of really awesome people are all the time helping people. And in the end, also everybody can always shout on Twitter or like help, and hopefully someone comes by and sees and helps. Nobody should be staring 4 hours at the screen because they're not sure what to put there. Like, asking for help is something that we're always taught not to do, but especially in these situations, it's just the right thing to do and necessary.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I feel like I'm a little spoiled with my Twitter followers, that I have a good enough following of people that can answer these tough questions. But the Discord, that would be really good. I didn't even know about the Discord. So it seems like there are multiple Discords, but there's specifically TypeScript related ones. And I used to use IRC all the time when I was younger to help with Lua, because I didn't understand the language and I didn't really know even where to look it up. And I didn't know which were part of the game engine I was working with, what was part of the language. And going to the IRC, they always were helpful. Although sometimes they were not very happy about helping me because I would ask a lot of questions. But like even the Discord or something like that, you can ask lots of questions. People who are interested will help you. I know if I was expert enough at TypeScript that I would feel very excited to help somebody with TypeScript in this way, because I feel like, I figured it out. Let me help you so you don't have to go through the same pain that I went through.
Yeah, kind of reminds me now of the old times when we were like in a forum and posting something. And we still do that. It's called Stack Overflow. And actually, TypeScript has a really good Stack Overflow. I'm talking like 2 years ago, because I'm not really looking into that part a lot at the moment. But back then Titian was there. There was a user called Shakehouse, and those two were essentially on there. It felt like 20 hours of the day. You put in a question that was complicated enough, and you got an answer that was also equally complicated, but quoting bugs in the TypeScript issues and giving you every detail. Like, that's another very good source to go to with questions. Of course, do your research. Has someone asked this before? The usual etiquette on Stack Overflow, but it's not an empty room to yell into, but there are really nice people that help everyone, and I really recommend that.
So thank you so much for your time, Lenz. That was such a good time. If you guys don't know, this is my first time ever talking to him. I've only spoken to him over Twitter. He was a reference through Mark Erickson because I talked to him about Redux. That's where I met Lenz, and this is the first time we've actually spoken. This is such a great conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Absolute pleasure. Happy to do it again.
Yeah. After this conversation with Lenz Weber, I feel way more confident with TypeScript myself. And now that some months have passed, it's February and this was recorded in October, I really feel much more confident because now I'm teaching other people TypeScript in the same way that Lenz taught it to me. So I hope you really got something out of this video because it can make you be at that next level where you can start teaching other people and you start being the TypeScript expert where you work. If you want to learn more, go ahead and subscribe. I've got more videos like this coming up. Hope you have a great time. See ya.